Did the luggage arrive? Starting today, my parents are moving in with us, so please be nice. That was the first thing he said, joking around. As if I wasn't already furious with him. How self-centered can this man be? That's the situation, so I'm counting on you. I know what he's up to. He wants to keep me in check by bringing his parents over, while also expecting me to sort various things out for him. Anger rushes through me, but I quickly smirk. Yeah. I just moved out of my house too. Huh? I hold back laughter at his dumbfounded voice. Apparently, he forgot who owns that house. Even Sean, who's listening to our conversation, is trying hard not to laugh. Because that house originally belonged to my grandparents, and I'm the owner now. Ah. So, whose permission were you planning to get for moving in? I refuse to let such people into my house. A mother-in-law who enjoys tormenting her daughter-in-law and a father-in-law who's obsessed with his grandson. And then. You thought I didn't know? You'll pay the price for this, rest assured. I'm Naomi Woods, a 32-year-old working mother on parental leave. I have a husband, Jack, and a 1-year-old son, Ethan. Ethan has just started walking, so I can't take my eyes off him. His wobbly walk is so endearing, and it's healing when he calls me with his little mouth. Ethan really loves his mom. I met Jack at work. My family runs a traditional bakery. Baking delicious bread every day, I spend my days smiling with my parents and younger brother. Excuse me, ma'am. Could I have your name and contact information? One day, a regular customer, him, asked me this. His face turned red as he asked, and I found him cute. We started dating. Naomi, your cooking is delicious. Really? Thank you. Yeah. So, will you keep cooking for me? By my side? And so, we got married. My parents were overjoyed about our marriage, but my much younger brother, Sean, always had a serious look on his face. Still, he didn't oppose it, and I believe he was happy for us. My dad's shop is gonna be taken over by Sean, so living with us would just wear Jack out. My dad suggested. So, we're living in my late grandparents' house, just the three of us. I was planning to watch Ethan grow up here, with Jack. One day, I went shopping with Ethan. Holding my hand, Ethan walked with effort. Oh, Ethan! He came with me. Now, say hi to Grandma. Hey, Ethan! After buying bread at my family's bakery, my parents and the regulars greeted Ethan with smiles. Ethan, unshy around others, smiled back. Since our family bakery and our house are about an hour's drive apart, I usually visit my parents' place about once a month. And when Ethan and I return home in a good mood. What? No way. The front door was unlocked. As I open the door, I see familiar shoes. And, as expected, I sigh. I've asked you to let us know in advance when you're coming over. Oh, you're finally back? Where on earth have you been? My mother-in-law, ignoring my words, lounges and watches TV. She probably entered using the spare key Jack must have given her. No matter how many times I tell her, she never listens. Sighing again, I think to myself. Come on, don't just stand there. Get moving and do some housework. I'll take care of Ethan. She picks up Ethan and tells me to clean up the mess she made eating her snacks. I wish she'd clean up after herself and not touch my son with her snack-covered hands. When I tell her this, she grumbles, "How dare you, a daughter-in-law, as if I'm dirty or something," and then to Ethan, "You have a scary mommy, don't you?" Please, don't say weird things to Ethan. I reply and take sleepy Ethan to his room. While doing the chores, she keeps making snide remarks. Honestly, I'd rather ignore her, but if I take my eyes off her, she'll try to take Ethan away. You're boring to talk to. I'm going home today, she says, and leaves. That's a relief for me, so I send her off with a smile. What a handful my mother-in-law is, I mutter and finish the interrupted chores. I understand she wants to see Ethan, her only grandchild. But I really wish she would stop using her spare key to barge into our house. Hey, can you please take back the spare key from your mom? What? Why? After Jack gets home, I tell him about his mother. He looks uneasy even after hearing me out. I glare at him. If you don't take back the spare key from her, I'm changing the locks. And this time, you won't get a key. All right. I'll take it back from her. Is that okay? He agrees reluctantly after I push him. I thought this would make things better. But I was wrong. Can you come with me to my parents' house this weekend to get the key? Jack asked me that weekend. I really didn't want to, but thinking it's better to see it with my own eyes, I went to his parents' house with Ethan. You finally arrived. I have a lot of housework for you to do, so get moving. Ethan will be fine with us. As soon as I entered my in-laws' house, Ethan was taken away by my in-laws, and I was saddled with chores. I glanced at Jack, but he stubbornly avoided my gaze. I've been tricked. He set me up. That's what I thought, but it's tough in a 3-against-1 situation. Besides, I didn't want to stay long in a dusty and dirty house like this, so I quickly got to work on the chores. While I was cleaning, I heard Ethan's loud cries. Ethan! What's wrong? I rushed over in a panic and found Ethan crying and struggling in his grandfather's arms. He reached out for me, so I took Ethan from his grandfather. What did you do to Ethan? Oh, stop it. We didn't do anything. That's right. As I glared, Jack, who had been ignoring everything, started to explain what happened. Apparently, Ethan tried to follow me, and his grandfather caught him and forcefully held him, interfering with his attempt. His grandfather then carelessly played with him, ignoring Ethan's desire to be with me. Ethan is such a crybaby for a boy. Right. It's because he's being raised by a lousy daughter-in-law like you. He should really be with us. I can't leave Ethan here. Excuse us. I hugged Ethan tightly and rushed out of the house. I shouldn't have believed Jack's words. I'm sorry, Ethan. I went home and laid the exhausted Ethan in bed. Then, I called my mom to vent about everything. Meanwhile, I heard nothing from Jack, who was left at the in-laws. About an hour later, the doorbell rang. Sis, can I come in? Sean? What's up all of a sudden? Mom told me to come here. I brought some bread from home. Sean was there with bread from our family bakery. He told me I must be tired and took over the household chores for me. He also cheerfully took care of Ethan, who had just woken up, improving both our moods. You're a lifesaver, Sean. It's no big deal, we're family. Also, a message from Mom. She said you can always come back home. Hearing that, I felt relieved knowing I have such a dependable family. Jack returned a few hours after Sean left. He had conveniently eaten at his parents' house before coming back. Ethan and I were really hurt this time. I'm really sorry. But you know, Dad and Mom didn't mean any harm. Ethan was crying. He showed signs of remorse when I got angry. However, it didn't seem sincere, and I couldn't trust him anymore. The thought of divorce crossed my mind. Jack, it's time to wake up. Jack? When I woke up in the morning, Jack was gone. In his place, there was a note. I'm going on a business trip to Chicago starting today. You could have told me that directly. Well, it's less irritating without him here. Besides, it's good for us to have some space to cool off. If he's not here, it's no problem to change the locks. This will give us some peace for a while, right, Ethan? Ethan, not understanding the words, smiled at my smiling face. With just Ethan, I didn't need Jack. That's what I thought. From then on, Jack and I began living separately. He was on a long business trip and too busy to return home. I do miss Ethan. And I miss Naomi's cooking. The distance helped us reconcile, and we started updating each other once a week via video calls. Meanwhile, I hadn't heard anything from my mother-in-law since changing the locks. I thought she would at least ring the doorbell incessantly, but she did nothing. It was peaceful, but I felt an uneasy calm before a storm. Sis! Something terrible happened! Just then, I received a call from Sean. Confused by my brother's agitated state, I listened and discovered a secret about Jack. That idiot. I'll never forgive him. Fueled by anger, I began preparing my revenge. With the help of my parents, who were informed by Sean, we successfully completed our plan in 2 days. And just as Sean and I were about to leave the house with Ethan, there was a knock on the door. "Excuse me, I've come to deliver some packages." Oh, sure. Just leave them here for now." A ton of packages had arrived at our house. Upon checking the names, they belonged to Jack's parents. I immediately called Jack. "Did the packages arrive? From today, you'll be living with my parents. Good luck." What a joke. That was the first thing he said. As if I wasn't angry enough at him already. How selfish can this man be? That's the plan, so count on it. I knew what he was up to. He wanted to control me by bringing his parents into the house while he sorted out his own conveniences. Rage surged through me, but I quickly smirked. "Yeah. I just finished moving out myself." "What?" I had to hold back my laughter at Jack's dumbfounded voice. It seemed he had forgotten who owned that house. Sean, listening beside me, also struggled to contain his laughter. "Because, that house originally belonged to my grandparents, and I'm the owner now." "Oh. So, who exactly did you plan to cohabit with without permission?" I'd never let such people into my house. A mother-in-law who enjoys making her daughter-in-law's life miserable, and a father-in-law who tosses his grandson around. And you think I knew nothing? You'll definitely pay the price for this. Who would live with a husband who cheats on business trips? "Wait a minute, you moved out?" "Exactly as I said. I've already sold that house." "What? Why would you do something so drastic? My parents are supposed to arrive there this afternoon." Apparently, he had planned to force cohabitation without my consent. The reason why I hadn't had any surprise visits from my mother-in-law recently must have been because she was busy packing for the move. Dealing with all the clutter at my in-laws' house must have been a hassle. But well, that's not my problem anymore. "Don't mess with me. The one messing around is you and your parents. Their packages are at the front door. Bye." With that, I ended the call. He tried to call back immediately, but I blocked his number and all other contacts. "Sorry for the wait, Sean." "It's okay. Come on, let's go." I owe Sean so much. It was thanks to him that I found out about Jack's affair. Sean had gone to Universal Studios in Orlando with his girlfriend, and there he spotted Jack cozily arm-in-arm with an unknown woman. I hadn't seen my brother-in-law since the wedding, but he was a regular, so I remembered him. He took evidence of the affair and let me know. Then, with my parents' help, I got straight to work. Among the regulars at our family bakery was a private investigator, who got us more evidence. And through the PI's connections, we found a lawyer. A real estate agent, a friend of my father's, quickly got to work on selling the house. That house had been renovated before you two moved in, sparkling from top to bottom. There's a school nearby, and it's walking distance to the station. So it'll sell high and fast. Dad said. True to his word, the house sold quickly. The handover was supposed to be today, but then all those packages from my in-laws arrived. I'm home. Welcome back, Naomi. And you too, Ethan. Both of you, welcome home. You must be tired. Thanks to my parents' warm welcome, I let out a sigh of relief. I'm home, I said with a smile, and Ethan also raised his cheerful voice. Everyone laughed in response. Now, all that was left was to fight back. I'm gonna work hard, so cheer for me, okay? To my words, Ethan kept smiling adorably as usual. Oh, Naomi. Are you working at the shop today? Yes, I am. Please buy a lot. Then, I started working at the shop front while taking care of Ethan. The regular customers greeted me with smiles. Being back at the shop was a fun time for me. It was then that it happened. Naomi! Naomi! Jack and his parents appeared. I stopped what I was doing, handed Ethan to my mother, and confronted them. Let's step outside so we don't bother the other customers, shall we? I don't care about the other customers. What's with this rash decision you made? Oh, but going on a business trip and cheating is not rash? My words drew cold stares from the regular customers towards Jack. Noticing that, Jack fell silent for a moment, but then. We sold our house with the intention of living in that house. Where are you expecting us to live now? And according to Jack, it seems like it's Naomi who's been cheating. His parents accused. I was baffled by his father's words. Me, cheating? That's absolutely impossible. I've only ever cared for Ethan. What are you talking about? I haven't cheated on anyone. Lies! Some young guy was coming out of our house, wasn't he? The young man they're talking about is probably my brother, Sean. Eh? Brother? Didn't I tell you? I have a younger brother. As we were talking, Sean popped his head out from the back. Seeing his face, Jack realized and looked surprised. Long time no see, Jack. Is he really your brother? So? You thought I was cheating, so without checking, you cheated as well? The business trip was real. But during it, Jack became involved with another woman and chose not to return home, opting to nurture this new love. And then, to support this woman, you got into debt? Eh? At my words, Jack's parents turned to stare at him. Meanwhile, Jack turned pale, wondering how I knew. I did my research, unlike you. You ran out of our joint account money and resorted to a loan, right? Was it $40,000? When I last checked the account, there were only a few dollars left, which was shocking. I had been covering our living expenses with my child support payments and my salary before maternity leave. That money was in my personal account from before we married, securely saved, so it couldn't be touched. In our joint account, we had agreed to save regularly for Ethan's future expenses. But this is too much. Then, shall we let others decide? I sold the house I inherited from my grandparents, which Jack had unilaterally decided to share with his parents, while he was busy with infidelity and accumulating debt on his business trip. Which of us is at fault, huh? At my words, the regular customers glared at Jack and his parents. Realizing they were in a bad position, they backed off. Could you please leave? I said with a smile, and they hurriedly left the shop. Having successfully driven them away, I was applauded by the regular customers, and I blushed with a shy smile. After that, I filed for damages against Jack for the affair and for disturbing the business at our family bakery. Jack, burdened with debt from his affair, couldn't pay, and his irresponsible parents had no money either. So, they had to sell whatever they could to scrape together some money. I really regret it. Please help me. Jack pleaded, clinging to me. I sighed deeply at his behavior. Do you expect me to trust your regret? No, this time I really am. Just stop it. If you persist, I'll call the police. In my words, Jack's shoulders slumped in defeat. I gave him a cold look. I know why you wanted to live with those two so badly. At my words, Jack visibly shivered. His parents had always complained about their small house and wanting someone to do household chores. In essence, they wanted to live in that house with me as their housekeeper. Meanwhile, Jack, who was always outwitted by me, thought he could control me with his parents around. He probably planned to use the money saved from living expenses for his own purposes or to pay off debts. Maybe he even intended to search for my savings account from before we were married. Am I wrong in my thinking? How do you know all this? Being in customer service means observing people. Besides, I married you because I loved you, even though you approached me. I always pay close attention to someone I've loved, even once. I know how you think. Jack looked down, crestfallen at my words. Then, damn it, tried to lash out at me. But before his hand could reach me, someone stepped in to stop him. That's going too far. Sean glared fiercely at Jack. Sean had been practicing martial arts for a long time and was in great shape. Jack, grabbed and glared at by Sean, completely lost his nerve. Don't ever show your face to my sister again. Shouted at by Sean, Jack left with a pathetic cry. Thanks, Sean. Don't mention it. Let me know if anything else happens. I'll drive him away. Sean's smile seemed so dependable. You used to hide behind me and cry all the time. Come on, stop it. I'm an adult now. Plus, I have someone to protect. Right. Just don't become a man like him. Sean laughed at my words, saying, of course. He would surely protect his girlfriend well. Both of you, come help out, please. Okay. Called by our mother, we returned to the shop. After that, Jack was too scared to show up around Sean. Moreover, when the lawyer handed him the divorce papers, he signed them without a fuss. We were finally divorced. Actually, the regular customers were furious about how you suffered because of Jack, my mother told me. It seems the story of what happened at the shop spread around, eventually reaching the ears of Jack's coworkers. Once the news spread through his company, Jack had no place there. Facing cold stares from his colleagues, he quit his job. I feel bad about it, so please help. I learned this through a call from my mother-in-law. I had completely forgotten to block their contact information in the midst of everything. Help with what? Well, obviously, financial support. Unfortunately, I'm not kind enough to help someone who harassed me, I said, ending the call. This time, I made sure to block the number. Unable to gather the money for alimony and child support, Jack resorted to borrowing from dangerous sources. Apparently, his affair partner, thinking he was single, promptly left him. I even heard rumors that Jack and his parents were taken away by some men in black suits. Mommy. What's up, Ethan? Meanwhile, our lives were peaceful. We took turns looking after Ethan, enjoying our days with ease. The regular customers also adored him. Separating from Jack brought us happiness. Let's play with Mommy today. Ethan responded with an angelic smile to my words. Sometime later, our family grew. Sean's girlfriend came to our house. She adored Ethan. I'm so happy to have a nephew like him, she exclaimed. I think I can build a happy family with her, Sean said with a smile. A kind person like him choosing her meant she must be all right. If anything happened, I'd be there to help this time. We had no more contact from Jack's side. Thanks to that, our days were very calm. Okay, Mommy's gonna work hard, so stay with Grandma today, okay? Now, the five of us would watch Ethan grow. And I, once again, walked forward, ready to bake delicious bread. Years later, our family grew even more. Sean and his girlfriend got married, and they had a child. Moreover, someone appeared who wanted to be with me. If anyone makes you cry, I'll protect you. Ethan, who has grown up, now says such things. Together with Ethan, I continue to run the bakery today. Help! Actually, my parents. Yesterday, I was run over by a car driven by my mother-in-law and rushed to the hospital. After the surgery, while I was resting, my husband called. After you were taken away yesterday, the police came. I told them you were startled by the car and fell. But now they're saying someone saw Mom run you over. Summarizing my husband's excited rambling, it seems both my in-laws were taken to the police station. I was indeed injured by my mother-in-law driving the car yesterday. Yet, both the person who ran me over and my father-in-law, who was in the passenger seat, lied in their testimony. My husband had orchestrated it, making it seem like I fell and got injured. I was dumbfounded for a while. Hey! Are you listening? Anyway, you need to go and explain that it was just a fall. That's the first thing he says to me after I was rushed to the hospital? My anger reached its limit, and I decided to take revenge on my husband and in-laws. They must think I'll always do as they wish, but that won't happen. Then it struck me. Yes, this will surely prove I was run over by my mother-in-law. In pain, I reached for my phone again. My name is Emma, I'm 50 years old. Since marrying, I've been a homemaker. I met my husband, Hayden, in my 20s, a typical office romance. He was assigned to look after me when I joined the company. He wasn't particularly handsome or appealing to women. Naturally, I had no romantic feelings for him. I never saw him as more than a colleague, just diligently following his instructions every day. However, working together, he took a keen interest in me. I thought he was just happy to have a subordinate close to his age, but gradually realized it was more than that. Initially reluctant, I started feeling good about being flattered every day. Thinking back, I don't know what I saw in him. But I fell for his sweet talk, and we started dating. We worked together for a while, and about a year later, he proposed. Having no reason to refuse, I accepted. Convincing myself this was what life was about, I started a new chapter. At my husband's behest, I quit my job and, without discussion, started living at his parents' house. I had visited my in-laws a few times before marrying but never imagined living with them. They were warm and welcoming on those few occasions, which reassured me. By that time, my father-in-law had retired, so I spent my days with them while my husband was at work. There was no sweet newlywed life. It was nothing like I had imagined. At first, they seemed somewhat considerate, but their attitude towards me changed over time. My mother-in-law's demands grew day by day, crushing my spirit. "You're able to be a homemaker thanks to Haydn, so you better be perfect at housework." Whenever something slightly displeased her, she would eagerly scold me. She never doubted her mission to educate the imperfect daughter-in-law, which seemed to be her life's purpose. She lived with her mother-in-law too and often bored me with stories of back in my day. Times and values have changed. Being forced to accept her outdated mindset was nothing but a nuisance. But due to my position, I had no choice but to silently endure her constant nagging. She often went to a cafe with her friends of the same age, where they seemingly enjoyed bashing their daughters-in-law. Oddly enough, they didn't brag about how great their daughters-in-law were, but rather competed over who had the worst one. Hearing these stories made me wonder if I would end up like them, filling me with dread. As for my father-in-law, he wasn't exactly supportive either. Although he didn't antagonize me like my mother-in-law, he complained about my cooking almost daily. "The seasoning is too strong today. Are you trying to get rid of the elderly quickly?" His old-fashioned attitude, viewing women as inferior, was evident. Whenever the topic comes up, he keeps saying how women should be. That women should be considerate and assist men, or that they should understand things without being told. It's embarrassingly idealistic. I guess some people never change, always acting high and mighty no matter their age. My father-in-law doesn't exactly pick on me. He's more about boasting his beliefs to me, proud of his outdated thinking. He'll probably never realize his mistakes and just keep getting older like this. They're just like those unpleasant in-laws you see in dramas. I've tried discussing it with my husband several times, but he always gives vague responses. Instead, as our marriage has gotten longer, he started blaming me. "My parents are elderly, you should be kinder to them. Isn't that what a daughter-in-law should do?" Like father, like son. Following in his parents' footsteps, my husband also started to look down on and exploit me. He doesn't help with anything when he comes home, just sits there as if it's the most natural thing. Maybe things would have been different if we had kids, but we never had any. I went to the hospital for infertility treatments until my late 30s, but the dream never came true. Right after we got married, my in-laws were always pressuring me about when they would see a grandchild. It's not entirely my fault. Children are a blessing. It's ridiculous to think about having a baby just for my in-laws. I figured there was no need to force it, so I gave up when I turned 40. In this less than happy life, there were people who supported me. The couple, who lived across the street. Juliana and Kyle lived together without any children. Kyle's mother had lived with her mother-in-law and she didn't want to cause the same trouble, so he refused to live together. Juliana was there for me during my infertility struggles and even listened to my complaints about my in-laws. My in-laws and husband are all about appearances, so Juliana was initially surprised. "I thought your husband was a nice guy. It's a bit off-putting that he's still not independent from his parents at his age." Thanks to Juliana, I managed to get through life without getting too overwhelmed. My mother-in-law, over 75, still drives herself when going out. It looks dangerous, and I've warned my husband, but he doesn't listen. If I suggest she should give up her driver's license, he explodes, "Are you calling my mom an idiot?" He gets furious, thinking I'm insulting his mother. I tried talking to my mother-in-law too, but she still thinks she's young. "Are you treating me like an old lady? You're really unpleasant," she says, getting as angry as my husband. I was worried something terrible might happen, and it did, but not in the way I expected. That day, as usual, I walked to the nearby supermarket. Without a driver's license, walking is mostly how I get around. I thought about getting a license after starting a job, but I got married sooner than expected. When I discussed it with my husband, he was against it, saying, "I can drive, so you don't need it." On sale days, I end up with too much to carry, but there's no way I can ask my husband or mother-in-law for a ride. My husband, who used to happily offer a ride when we were younger, now just scoffs and refuses. I was carrying heavy bags and had just gotten back home when I noticed. The garage door was open. Did she say she was going out today? My mother-in-law hadn't mentioned anything when I left the house. Well, never mind, I thought, passing the garage to head to the front door, when suddenly a car roared out of the garage at high speed. "Oh!" It was the only silly thing I could utter in surprise. The next moment, the car hit me without slowing down. It threw me backward by the impact and groceries tumbled from my bags. In that position, my body slammed into the asphalt. Dazed, not understanding what happened, I felt a sharp pain in the back of my head from the impact. I couldn't get up. All I could do was lie there, looking up at the sky. How long had passed when I realized Juliana was looking down at me. "Hang in there. I've called an ambulance, everything's gonna be okay." Juliana's face, speaking to me, was pale and strained. I wondered if things had gotten that serious. A naive question crossed my mind. As I moved my aching head slightly, I could see blood flowing from it. Seeing this, I began to understand the gravity of my situation. I started to realize the seriousness of the situation. But there was nothing I could do, unable to move. Soon, I could hear the ambulance siren getting closer. "Just a little longer. They're almost here, hang on." As I listened to Juliana's desperate encouragement, my head started to feel fuzzy. "No, no. Just a little longer." Despite her words, I closed my eyes. When I opened them again, I was lying on a hospital bed. A tube 4-in-4 was connected to my hand, and I could see the fluid dripping continuously. Realizing I was saved, tears naturally flowed. Moving my head slightly brought sharp pain. It was no wonder, given the bleeding. "Ugh!" As I groaned in bed, a nurse rushed over. "You shouldn't move your head yet." I had many questions, but listened silently to the nurse's explanation. It had been one day since the accident. I was rushed to the hospital by the emergency team called by Juliana. After arriving, I underwent surgery to stitch up my head and survived. Juliana had stayed with me the whole time, and now she had returned home as it was past visiting hours. It seemed she had contacted my husband Hayden too, but after telling him the surgery was successful, he didn't say anything else. My whole body was in pain, but there was no life-threatening injury. I just needed to rest for a while. However, I didn't feel like doing anything. With so many things to think about, I just closed my eyes. Soon after, my phone on the bedside table started ringing insistently. I didn't want to answer, but the calls persisted. After several repeats, it seemed there was no sign of giving up. I found my phone without moving my head and saw Hayden on the screen. Thinking he must be worried, I answered with a slight relief. "Help! Actually, my parents." Hayden started speaking without giving me a chance to talk. "After you were taken away yesterday, the police came. I told them you were startled by the car and fell. But now they're saying someone saw Mom run you over." Summarizing my husband's frantic story, it seems both of my in-laws had been taken to the police station. Indeed, I was injured by a car driven by my mother-in-law. Yet, she and my father-in-law, who was in the passenger seat, had lied. Even Hayden had instructed them to agree that I had fallen and got hurt. I was dumbfounded for a while. Fortunately, the car wasn't damaged. Dad wasn't hurt, but Mom seemed to have twisted her neck from the collision. Despite that, poor them, the police are being so one-sided. He was more concerned about the car and his parents, oblivious to my shock. How rotten can this family be? Since picking up the phone, has he said even one word of concern for me? No, nothing. He was only worried about his parents, taken to the police, and even wanted me to prove their innocence. Hey! Are you listening? Anyway, you need to go and explain it was just a fall. The number you have dialed is currently. He was talking to me one-sidedly, but he was surprised by my first response. Huh? I cut off the call. Calls from Hayden continued for a while, but I, infuriated, set my phone to reject his calls. I later learned that my in-laws had been taken to the police station, just as my husband had said on the phone. Sometime later, my husband Hayden was also taken to the police station where my in-laws were waiting. It was Juliana, our neighbor, who had seen everything unfold. She was the one who had originally called the police about my mother-in-law's crime. After accompanying me in the ambulance, she handled various procedures in place of Hayden. She was questioned by the police officers who arrived at the scene. It seems her questioning happened after they had already spoken to my in-laws, serving as a sort of corroboration of the story. Juliana noticed the accident when she heard a loud noise outside. Looking out her window, she saw me lying on the street. And she hurriedly called an ambulance before rushing out. By that time, my mother-in-law's car was gone, and it wasn't clear what had happened. Juliana was more concerned about my safety than finding the cause. When questioned, she told the truth. However, my in-laws immediately denied any suggestion by the police that I had been hit by a car. Sensing something was off, Juliana kept thinking even after the police officer left. After ensuring my surgery was complete, she returned home and discussed the incident with her husband Kyle. Then Kyle came up with an unexpected solution. The car's dashcam, it records 24/7. The accident happened right in front of our car, it must have caught everything. They checked the camera in their car together. Just as I thought. True to Kyle's hunch, the moment of my accident was recorded. The footage unmistakably showed my mother-in-law hitting me with her car. After I fell, my father-in-law peeked out of the car window before they drove away. It was a clear hit and run. Armed with the footage of my in-laws' crime, they went to the police station. They were able to prove that I hadn't simply fallen and injured myself. The police, having heard from Juliana, immediately questioned my in-laws. Despite the video evidence, my in-laws were reluctant to admit their guilt. That video is a setup. Someone is trying to frame me. Officer, please, you can't put an old lady like me in jail, right? Both my mother-in-law and father-in-law were embarrassingly adamant in denying the crime. Eventually, my mother-in-law admitted guilt, claiming she was instructed to hide the truth by her son. Indeed, Hayden had told his parents to align their stories. But I questioned my mother-in-law's sanity for betraying her own son to save herself. My father-in-law, perhaps tired from the interrogation, admitted that he was in the passenger seat but had fled without helping me. When the police interrogated Hayden, he also struggled to admit his involvement. Then a detective came to my hospital room. Your parents both say they were instructed by their son to cover up the accident. At first, they lied through their teeth, but this seems to be the truth. Perhaps feeling sorry for my ordeal, the detective spoke with evident regret. They inspected the car but found no major damage. If Hayden had repaired any damage to the car, it would have been considered evidence tampering. However, Hayden wisely decided against it. Since then, I haven't seen Hayden at all and have lost all affection for him. I told the detective about the phone call. He then said that at that time he had instructed his parents to keep their mouths shut. The detective sighed deeply after hearing this. I don't know what to say. I can only imagine how you feel. He sympathized with me, someone who had been betrayed by her family after suffering a serious injury requiring surgery. After a while of heavy silence, the detective bowed deeply and left the room. A few days later, when I was about to be discharged from the hospital, the police contacted me again. Juliana, who had come to pick me up in place of Hayden, drove me straight to the station. The detective from the previous day greeted us. It turned out he was the same one who had heard Juliana's story, and he led us inside. In the room, we were met with the gaunt figures of Hayden and my in-laws. Emma, my mother-in-law, upon seeing me enter the room guided by the detective, suddenly began to tear up. I thought it was insincere, but she seemed genuinely crying. Whether she felt relieved to see a family member or was relieved to see me alive, hoping for a lighter sentence, I couldn't tell. We waited for my mother-in-law to calm down before beginning. A female officer soothed her, and she finally seemed ready to talk. My father-in-law, sitting next to her, looked utterly exhausted and kept repeating "I'm sorry" to me. The specific purpose of the day was to align the details of the accident with me, the victim, present. The screen displayed the footage of the accident submitted by Juliana. While watching it, the detective proceeded to discuss each detail. My in-laws answered the questions honestly, and I nodded in agreement, confirming the facts. The main issue was whether my husband Hayden was involved. Following my statement, his call history had been checked, which proved he had called me. However, even now, Hayden continued to deny any involvement. I, unfortunately, hadn't recorded the content of our call, so the conversation wasn't progressing. "Are you trying to frame me too, you liar?" At times, the detective calmed Hayden, who became emotional and appeared agitated. "Please stop. Lying any further will only lead to your regret. Do you want to betray your own mother and father to save yourself?" My warnings fell on deaf ears. Feeling an impasse, the detective spoke up. "So, your parents are continuing to lie to the police, is that correct?" With that question, Hayden fell silent. My words carried a different weight. "Your mother running over your wife is clearly captured on the video, which both of your parents have admitted to. But according to you, your parents, out of self-preservation, are implicating you as an accomplice." The detective's serious tone made Hayden's face tense. "Do you understand? The crimes of your parents are becoming even more serious." Hearing this, Hayden finally admitted his guilt. At the very end, he realized the gravity of his actions. With Hayden's confession, all three were fully exposed. Police officers in the room started moving around hurriedly. Regarding this matter, the detective then turned to me, discussing whether I wanted to withdraw the complaint. While the crimes committed by the three couldn't be erased, this decision would significantly alter their fate. However, I firmly declined. I was lucky to survive, but their decision to flee the scene right after the accident is unforgivable. I'll be filing a complaint to ensure they pay for their crimes. My decision caused a significant stir among them. My mother-in-law cried out loud, and both my father-in-law and Hayden slumped in despair. They probably never imagined I would make such a ruthless decision. They all believed themselves to be good spouses, a good mother-in-law, and a good father-in-law, assuming I would naturally forgive them. Had they handled the situation properly after the accident, it wouldn't have come to this. But my in-laws chose to protect themselves over my life. Hayden prioritized his parents' and public image over his wife's life. I want them to reflect on the gravity of their actions and duly pay for their crimes. I stood up silently and left the room. Accompanied by Juliana, I started the paperwork in a separate room. Living with my in-laws and Hayden for years. It would be a lie if I said that it doesn't hurt my heart. Above all, I was the one most hurt. Even if my physical injuries heal, this trauma will follow me for life. Despite not having done anything wrong, I felt far from relieved. By the time we left the police station, it was already dark. Juliana, thoughtful as always, invited me to a celebratory dinner for my discharge. I gratefully accepted her invitation and headed to Juliana's home. Warmly welcomed by Juliana and Kyle, we enjoyed a meal together. For the first time in a long while, I laughed. They treated me as usual, with care and kindness. Even though my in-laws and Hayden were no longer in my life, I was now on my own. With legal proceedings and other tasks ahead, it felt overwhelming. But at that moment, I chose to forget all that and genuinely enjoyed myself. The morning after that pleasant night, I decided to divorce Hayden. There was no need to keep tormenting myself. Hayden seemed a bit chastened by the whole ordeal, but I realized I couldn't love him anymore. I immediately contacted a lawyer and brought up the subject of divorce with Hayden. At first, he seemed surprised, but soon he agreed, seemingly understanding the situation. I couldn't bear to see Hayden's pathetic state any longer, so I left everything else to my lawyer. The three of them faced criminal charges, and in addition, they were ordered to pay me a settlement. Since the divorce was largely Hayden's fault, I received a significant amount in alimony. I decided to leave my in-laws' house and rented an apartment with the money I received. I had planned to start anew in a distant place, but I chose to stay in the familiar town. There is a reason I didn't move away. Juliana's husband, Kyle, owned a company. He invited me to help out at his company. Juliana was also helping there, and I thought it would be nice to work together. I had been invited before but always declined, fearing what my in-laws or Hayden might say. Honestly, with the alimony I received, I didn't need to work anymore. But Juliana and Kyle were concerned about me. Suddenly being alone, they gave me a sense of purpose. Having spent decades as a housewife, working with friends was very enjoyable. There were many new things that confused me, but it became a significant part of my life. And so, with this new life, an unexpected encounter awaited me. I met a man through work and decided to remarry. I had told him about my divorce, but kept quiet about the alimony until we got married. He didn't blame me for it. "It's natural to be cautious after what you've been through," he said with a smile. My life changed drastically in my middle years. Perhaps more fulfilling and happier than my younger years. I was betrayed and hurt by someone I trusted for many years, but I found greater happiness that surpassed it. Grateful to the friends who always reached out to me, I began walking towards a brighter future. My name is Kathy. I'm a 45-year-old who's become quite the health enthusiast, all thanks to starting to feel back pain when I wake up in the morning. I've really gotten into running and such. Now that I think about it, for the past few years, my wish has always been to stay healthy. Quite a change from my younger days when I wished to get along with the boy in the next class. How the subtle signs of aging sneak up on me. Today, I want to share a story from before I turned into a health nut. I would like you to listen to it. Let's wind back the clock by 10 years. I was 35 then, and in my own words, I was an adorable, head-turning, super cute, pretty girl, or so I wish I could say. But sorry, that's just a fantasy. It was full of wishes. The real story is about when I quit my job and was diligently helping with house duties. Contrasting my drab life, my older brother, Steve, brought home a dazzling woman after announcing he was planning to get married. And by dazzling, I mean really glittery. She was wearing heavy makeup. Her lips shone with gloss. I worried if she might attract flies. Her hair was softly curled, giving her a relaxed vibe, and her nails were intricately designed, clearly done at a salon. I thought, wow, she's a pro. Not just some ordinary one. She brought a nightclub vibe right into our house. Even my parents seemed a bit confused. And I was right. Steve and this woman, Rachel, met at a nightclub. She was working there, and Steve bragged like it was some heroic tale that he had wooed her. But I doubt it was his charm alone. Steve looks every bit the rich guy. How? He's decked out in brand name stuff from head to toe, so much so that it's almost tacky. Glasses, suit, tie pin, belt, shoes. All designer brands. If a brand name laden guy like that came at me, I'd probably play coy too. I can imagine the Benjamin Franklins and Amex cards he must flaunt. No wonder Rachel showed him a smile just for him. It seemed unlikely for someone as plain and kind as Steve to land such a girlfriend. But, hold on, aren't I being too judgmental about Steve and Rachel? I think so, but it's also true that Rachel's flashy look and skimpy skirt made it hard to shake off that impression. Plus, I just found out she was only 20. I was 35. A younger sister-in-law, huh? I was confused about how to act towards Rachel. My mother looked pale, wondering about the age difference, while my father seemed resigned. Despite our confusion, Rachel cheerfully said she was looking forward to marrying Steve. The meeting was more of a marriage announcement than a conversation, leaving us all dumbstruck. The next day, Steve said he knew we must have been uncomfortable and proposed a dinner for us to relax and get to know Rachel better. I had to admit, we had judged her based on her looks and mannerisms without really talking to her. Maybe she was a good person if I talked to her. I didn't really talk to her in the first meeting. I wasn't thrilled, but for Steve's sake, I decided to give it a chance. My parents agreed, and the dinner was set for the following weekend. Surprisingly, the dinner went smoothly. Rachel, being in the hospitality industry, she knew how to engage even us, a somewhat plain family. We could follow the conversation easily since she included stories about Steve. From her looking, she seemed like a different world from the one we live in, but I had to admit my initial judgment was wrong. But then, as I was returning from the restroom, I overheard Rachel on her phone, bad-mouthing our family. They're all plain. Especially the mother, whose face is covered in wrinkles and spots, which is really impossible. I don't want to grow old like that. I thought they were rich, but it was normal. The father is also a bit of an old man, so I'm not sure if I'll be able to handle it. I'm thinking of making up an affair and getting a quick divorce. The sister is older and doesn't have a boyfriend. I mean, she's so fat and employed that it's funny. I need to run away before she asks me to take care of her in the future. I was stunned. Was I hearing things? But no, there she was, cheerfully chatting away about bad things about my family. I was stuck. What should I do? Should I say, "What are you saying, whatever you want?" Or should I keep quiet? By the time I decided, she was back at the table. I reluctantly followed, not wanting to spoil the evening. The dinner ended without incident, but my family's view of Rachel skyrocketed, unaware of her true colors. Steve continued to hold dinners until the wedding, seemingly eager to integrate Rachel fully into our family. Our parents even started looking forward to these dinners, and Rachel's standing with us improved dramatically. I didn't record Rachel's phone conversation. I didn't even hear the other person's voice. And in front of my family, Rachel seems like such a nice girl. If I accuse her and she claims it's a misunderstanding or that I misheard, I might not be believed. Even now, I sometimes wonder if I really did mishear. But, darn it. Steve is my dear brother after all. What am I supposed to do? These thoughts have been troubling me for days. Then, one day, Steve said, "Rachel wants to have a meal with you, just the two of you. Go to this place. Don't worry, I'll cover the bill," while pointing to a map of a restaurant. It was a pretty upscale Italian restaurant. Free food is nice and all, but why me specifically? It's kinda scary. But, being a jobless person with nothing better to do, I had no reason to refuse. So, off I went to the Italian restaurant. "Kathy! Thank you for coming." Rachel greeted me with such enthusiasm when she saw me that, honestly, I didn't feel too bad. She really knows how to make people happy. I even started to doubt whether I had misheard that phone call. But as the meal progressed, the atmosphere started to feel a bit tense. "Kathy, it was a while ago, but you heard my phone conversation, didn't you?" "Yes. That first dinner we had. Right after I returned to the table, you came back too. But just behind you, a woman who had gone to the restroom came out. There's only one stall in that restroom. You weren't in there together, right?" Rachel chuckled. Wow, she's been keeping a close watch. True, I do remember a woman entering the restroom while I was overhearing Rachel's call. But I was so panicked by what Rachel was saying that I don't remember much else. I couldn't think of anything to say, so I just took a bite of my rice gratin. "Aren't you putting food before conversation? You'll only get fatter." Realizing I was being provoked, I thought, this is a taunt, all right. Let's not hide it anymore, but please don't spill our conversation to Steve or your parents, okay? Rachel said, laughing loudly. As an aside, my weight gain started when I worked in a toxic environment, leading to stress eating. I had a period of not eating at all, becoming skinny, but then I started overeating as a stress reliever and gained weight. Sure, I'm overweight, But now I'm focusing on my mental health, thinking, so what if I'm fat? I was just a bit over the standard weight. Living stress-free was what's important to me. I was okay with how I am, and I didn't see why Rachel should have a say. Especially since I was not causing her any trouble. You know, to be honest, I find you, and even your parents, kind of embarrassing. You get it, right? No way, how could I agree with being called embarrassing? Am I living in La La Land? I can't tell your parents not to come to the wedding, but Kathy, you don't have to force yourself. It must be hard to move around being overweight, right? I'll send you a wedding invitation just for formality, but please make an excuse and don't attend. Anyway, we'll accept your gift. Wow, does she think a jobless person like me has some big plans to miss my brother's wedding? And after coming all this way to this restaurant, she's saying moving is hard for me? No way. I wanted to punch her right in the face, but kept my cool and said, fine, I won't come, as you wish. But don't come crying to me later. After that, I left the restaurant. When I got home and told my parents, I'm not going to Steve's wedding, Mom panicked. What happened all of a sudden? Why would you say that? My father also looked puzzled. What's going on? Rachel told me. She'll accept a gift but doesn't want me at the wedding. Says I'm too embarrassed because I'm fat. Well, I paraphrased a bit, but it's essentially what she said. Really? Rachel said that? Their faces showed disbelief and confusion, like they couldn't believe it but also couldn't imagine I'd lie. I understand how you feel. I felt the same way until now. But listen to this. I placed a small recorder on the table. Right, I brought the recorder just in case, since it was going to be just Rachel and me at the restaurant. I really wanted some concrete evidence this time. So, when she asked if I had been eavesdropping on her phone call, I turned it on. Listening to the recording, my parents alternated between going pale and getting red with anger. After they heard everything, my father slammed his fist on the table and yelled, "She's making a mockery of our family." I didn't want to add fuel to the fire, but I had to share the necessary information. I told them that I'd been wary of Rachel from the beginning because she had said similar things at the first dinner. My mother buried her head in her hands, lamenting, what a troublesome daughter-in-law she's turned out to be. No, she's not yet, Mom. Steve hasn't registered the marriage. My parents looked shocked at my words. What do we do about the wedding then? If we cancel now, won't Steve be stuck with the cancellation fees? My father asked, worried. Don't worry, I have a plan. Steve won't lose a penny. I said this confidently. We split up and started calling Steve's relatives and friends who were invited to the wedding. We needed to tell them to cancel their attendance. To make sure everyone understood the situation, I set up the recording to be accessible online. Of course, I explained what happened verbally, but for those who found it hard to believe, they could listen to Rachel's words themselves. It was a case of hearing is believing. While calling, we apologized for having been too lenient in choosing a daughter-in-law and for dragging everyone into this mess, sincerely explaining why we wanted them to not attend. I won't lie, I was nervous. It felt like exposing our family's embarrassment, and I feared that no one would agree to such an outrageous request, possibly severing ties with relatives. But when we pleaded, we want to help our dear son, it's selfish but please cooperate, surprisingly, everyone readily agreed. They even reprimanded us, you can't let him marry someone like that. It makes sense. As it turned out, our relatives and Steve's childhood friends we could reach all decided to skip the wedding. We also informed the venue about the situation, explaining that everyone on Steve's side, except for work acquaintances we couldn't contact, would not be attending. Although it was a huge inconvenience, they understood, saying, it's a major life event, after all. I think it was more the wedding planner's kindness than the venue's official stance. We probably caused them a lot of trouble behind the scenes, but I'll never forget their understanding. Next was Steve. We waited until 3 weeks before the wedding, at the last minute, to tell him that everyone was bailing. After he learned everything, he just stood there in shock and finally said, I understand. If Steve had insisted on going through with the wedding regardless, our plan would have failed. But I trusted my sisterly intuition that it would be all right. Then, on the night before the wedding, a storm hit our house. Rachel stormed in with her parents, fuming. "What is the meaning of this?" Steve was right behind them. "Oh, Rachel, what's wrong?" My mother asked nonchalantly.
"What's wrong? Starting this week, the cancellations for the wedding have been trickling in. It was too strange, so when I pressed Steve, even your own family said they're not coming. What's happening on our big day?"
That was expected. We had asked everyone, including the venue, to cancel early, but to notify Rachel and Steve at the last minute. Rachel had reached out to me unnecessarily, thinking she could keep it under wraps until the wedding. Her impulsive nature and lack of composure made her reveal her true colors.
"Rachel said our family was embarrassed, so she didn't want your parents at the wedding. We just told everyone the truth and decided as a family not to attend." "Don't lie! Ruining such an important day with lies. The guest list is now less than half. How are you going to make this right?"
Rachel's parents, in a near frenzy, hugged her, saying, "Poor Rachel.
"What are you planning with all this? Do you want to call off the engagement?"
Rachel's mother glared at us sharply. But it wasn't for us to answer.
"Steve, you're not just going to stand there the whole time, are you?"
I nudged my brother, who looked unsure of what to do next.
"Oh,
What do you want, Steve?"
it's fine if we don't attend, but the decision is yours.
"Do you still want to get married?" My father started to object, but I stopped him. It was important for Steve to make his own decision without regret. He had once vowed to marry this woman. Even if we tell him she's awful, it's hard to believe instantly. But Steve isn't a man without judgment. I trusted him.
"I did love Rachel, and I really wanted to marry her.
See?
Steve is saying this, so you all need to understand the situation."
Rachel, mistaking Steve's words as support, slipped up and addressed us informally. Steve noticed this change and smiled sadly.
"I really have no eye for women. I hardly dated and got too excited about marrying a beautiful woman. You've always aimed too high despite a lifelong record of not being popular, Steve. Look at the mirror of reality. Right. Our family has a legacy of not being popular, tracing back to our great-grandfather. Embrace the plainness in your life."
Hey, I wasn't unpopular, you know.
"Mom, lying is bad."
We all teased Steve, who finally burst out laughing.
"Well, it was nice to dream for a while. I've decided, I'm calling off the wedding."
At that moment, our parents' faces lit up, and I high-fived them. "What are you doing? Making decisions on your own, and all of you yammering about it." Rachel burst out. "Exactly. The wedding is tomorrow. Please take this seriously. What's this about the family being embarrassing?" Rachel's mother finally asked. I internally cheered. I was about to bring it up myself, but it's more impactful if they ask out of curiosity. Forcing them to listen would just be ignored. "Glad you asked," I said and played the recording. Rachel's parents' faces gradually turned pale, but Rachel herself defiantly said, "So what, it's just a recording."
I've heard Rachel say various things about our family before. That's why she called only me to meet that day, and the recording itself is the best evidence that she wanted to talk to me.
Rachel claimed it was all made up, but her parents hung their heads in shame.
"I'm sorry. Our daughter is entirely at fault,"
Rachel's father said first.
"We let her grow up too freely, causing trouble for you. I'm sorry."
He apologized deeply, causing a bewildered Rachel to say,
"Wait, Dad. Why are you apologizing?" "Apologize right now."
Rachel's mother raised her voice.
"I can't believe she turned out to be such a rude daughter. We believed in you and came here, only to be embarrassed like this. Don't make us apologize." "What? Even Mom's against me now."
That moment. Then, with tears in his eyes, Rachel's father slapped her cheek.
"Enough. Demanding large sums of money from someone's sister, mocking the family of the man you were going to marry. When did you become so disgraceful? Don't forget,
You almost ruined Steve's life. Behind Rachel's father, who was laying down some harsh truths, Steve looked like he wanted to say, "My life won't be ruined by this. Don't make a mess on your own." Seeing Steve's laid-back reaction, I almost laughed. It felt like our family's trait was showing through. Steve, Kathy, and everyone. I'm truly sorry for everything that's happened. Perhaps feeling that wasn't enough, Rachel's father apologized again and again. We had no idea Rachel was being so disrespectful. Not knowing makes it even more shameful. Just apologizing isn't enough to atone for the embarrassment and trouble we've caused. To be honest, I didn't feel embarrassed, but Rachel's father's sentiment was painfully clear. Let's cancel the wedding. What? But the wedding is tomorrow. Won't we have to pay the full cancellation fee? So what? We should be thankful it can be resolved with money. You've done something that warrants being scolded here and now. You should be grateful to Steve and his family for not doing so. Rachel's father yelled, red-eyed with anger, while her mother repeatedly apologized to us. Wait, Dad, I can't pay that. We will pay. You'll take however many years necessary to repay us. And from now on, we're cutting ties with you. A joke, right? Rachel, desperately pulling on her father's clothes, pleaded, "Hey. Why am I being thrown out? Dad, do something, Mom too. You don't understand why you're being cast out, and that's why it's happening. If you understood, none of this would have happened." Rachel's mother said, looking at her with contempt. No way. Rachel collapsed, overwhelmed by the situation. I couldn't help but feel a bit smug at this unexpected turn of events. Serves her right. Even if I'm plain and was once overweight, I have my own strengths. Underestimating me comes with a price. Steve and everyone. Don't worry about the cancellation. We'll cover all the expenses incurred so far. I almost smiled, relieved at how smoothly things were going, but maintained a solemn face, thanking them. My parents, struggling to contain their joy, managed to keep their expressions ambiguous. Steve, out of Rachel's sight, silently cheered with a small victory gesture. I thought to myself, calm down a bit, he didn't do much. Within a month of the cancelled wedding, Rachel's parents brought us a gift, the cancellation fee, and an additional $60,000 as compensation. They had insisted on settling with us to avoid court and legal fees. We had trouble deciding on a fair amount, but eventually suggested an average sum. However, Rachel's father paid us the requested amount plus an additional $30,000. Honestly, I wasn't sure if we'd have received this much even if we went to court. Life isn't always like a story. Sometimes, you have to accept less than ideal outcomes. We're grateful for Rachel's parents' sincerity. As for Rachel, her parents took all her savings to cover the repayment and kicked her out with nothing. She hopped between friends' houses and sometimes resorted to sleeping in stations, almost homeless. Her parents accepted this as her just desserts, a tough love approach to teaching their once-spoiled daughter a lesson. I think he pushed the lion cub down the valley with extraordinary determination. Once a month, she shows up to make payments, so we know she's alive, her parents said with a complex smile. Fast forward 10 years. Steve, determined to get married, actively engaged in matchmaking and married a woman who worked in a restaurant and was an excellent cook. Being a food enthusiast, Steve was literally won over by her cooking. Now married, they rarely eat out, with Steve eagerly returning home for his wife's cooking. As for me, I had enough of corporate life and became a freelance translator. My previous job, dealing with foreigners, gave me a good language foundation. Realizing the demand for freelance translators, I studied hard and achieved my goal. Now, I earn significantly more than I did as an employee, working in a much more relaxed environment. Focusing on my studies curbed my overeating, and I returned to my pre-employment weight. No longer overweight or underweight, I'm just average, which feels great. Well, I don't know if I'm proud of the average. At least for me, I had a hard time becoming an average, so I'm really happy to be back to normal. And thanks to my work, if I may say so myself, I even married a handsome man. Introducing him to my family post-Rachel incident, They joked, "You're being fooled and no way a guy like him falls for your plain jeans." My husband said he loved my plain features. Just to be clear, my husband has no ill intentions at all. He's seriously praising me. He meant it as a compliment, so I take it positively. Our daughter is now 4. Every day is very lively and happy. The only issue is her bedtime storybook is about history. Surprisingly, she loves it and falls asleep peacefully to it every night. Only $4,000 for this month's allowance? What's this about? I told you to make it $6,000. I'm sorry, but your son, Robert, has passed away, so there won't be any more allowances. What? What are you talking about? There's $4,000 here. I know it's hard to believe, but it's true. My husband, Robert, took his own life. No way! Is it true? When? It was about a week after you last spoke on the phone with you. Why didn't you say anything? Robert wrote in his will not to have a funeral and to keep it a secret for a while. The mother-in-law, who had been angry about not receiving the $6,000 allowance, fell silent after hearing my words. It's only natural to be lost for words upon hearing of your son's passing. In the silence that followed, I thought this was the case, but it seems it wasn't. What a pity. I raised him with so much effort and money, thinking it was an investment. I was expecting to receive more money. Are you serious? Robert has passed away and those are the words you come up with? If he's gone, there's no need to mince words, right? Oh, and since I won't be getting Robert's $4,000 allowance anymore, remember, you and I had an agreement for a $2,000 allowance. Keep that up. Are you kidding me? I found myself yelling at the unbelievable words of my mother-in-law and hung up the phone. This was her true nature. Though it left a bad taste in my mouth, this likely settled the issue of the high allowance for my mother-in-law. About this phone call. Actually, my name is Emily. I'm 28, a company employee, and about to get married. My fiancé, John, is 32 and a mechanic who does repairs and maintenance on factory machinery. We don't live together before marriage, so we're still living separately. However, I have a key to his apartment, so I can come and go as I please. Therefore, I often visit his place. Welcome back. Oh, you smell again today. Dinner's ready, but why don't you take a bath first? I was gonna take a bath first without you saying. To avoid dirtying the interior, my husband took off his socks at the entrance and lifted the hems of his pants so they wouldn't touch the floor as he headed to the bathroom. John always comes home smelling of sweat and oil. It's not a pleasant smell, but it's proof of his hard work, so it's not something to dislike. I'm a serious person and I like my hardworking fiancé. Once we're done greeting your mother, let's start looking for a house to live in together. I've told you before, it's okay. After John comes out of the bath, it's dinner time. Lately, I always talk about house hunting during dinner. I can't wait to start living together. John always replies to my confirmation with a bored look, but his mouth relaxes as he eats. He must be looking forward to living together too. Once we live together, we'll say goodbye to this cheap studio apartment he's been frequenting. It's small and inconvenient, but leaving it feels a bit sad. I look around the room, like a graduate looking back at the classroom they once occupied. Even though John is over 30, he's continued to live in this cheap, small studio, but it's not because he earns little. I once asked him why. Hey, aren't you gonna move to a bigger place? Isn't it cramped and inconvenient here? Well, it's close to work and the rent is cheap. We can manage with the small space. Ah, I see. Apart from the size, it's convenient then. Gotta save money, you know. Robert is a saver. Not just on rent, but he also cuts corners on groceries, utility bills, and buys only the bare minimum of clothes. It's a bit stingy, but certainly better than being a spendthrift. I think a practical guy like him is good to marry. He's serious about work, sensible with money, and kind to me. So, I had no worries about marrying Robert. But, after meeting his mother, my anxiety about marriage suddenly grew. On the day we went to greet Robert's mother, I was nervous. Will it be okay? What if she doesn't like me? Aren't you worrying too much? It'll be fine. As we arrived at Robert's family home, my breathing became erratic. To calm down, I took a deep breath and sipped some water. There's a reason I was so nervous. Robert's mom divorced right after his birth. And after the divorce, his father disappeared, stopping child support payments. So, his mom raised Robert all by herself. The typical mother-in-law issue of feeling like her carefully raised son is being taken away seemed inevitable. Since she's a single parent, I really wanted to avoid any conflicts. To start a peaceful married life, it's crucial to make a good impression on her. After putting my water bottle back in my bag, I braced myself and entered Robert's family home. So, you're Robert's fiancé? I don't like you. Looks like a peaceful start to married life is off the table. We'd just made simple greetings at the entrance and were seated in the living room. It wasn't that I did something wrong, she just hadn't taken a liking to me from the start. Mom, why would you say something like that right off the bat? We're gonna be family, no need for formalities, right? Plus, it's better to be upfront about these things. Mom, no matter what you say, I'm gonna marry her. I'm not opposing the marriage, okay? I'm just expressing my feelings. Don't worry. A quiet parental argument unfolded before me. Feeling awkward, I fidgeted with my toes while sitting formally, hoping time would pass quickly. What don't you like about Emily? She's just a mid-level company employee, not earning much, right? I came to greet her for marriage, but the conversation was just between Robert and his mom. Butting in might worsen her impression of me. So, I left it to Robert. Still, being called low income irked me a bit. Sure, my salary isn't that high. But it's not low either, and I don't struggle with living expenses. Maybe she's just worried her son might struggle if he marries someone who might not contribute much financially? Emily, despite what I said, my son is precious to me. Please take good care of him. Yes, I understand. Finally, the hellish time that felt like 1 minute stretched to 10 was over. Though Robert's mother said she didn't like me, she wasn't opposed to our marriage and ended up saying she wished us well. She must be just concerned about her son. Thinking positively, I decided to work on deepening our relationship with her and stood up, my legs a bit numb. Just a second, Robert. As we were about to leave through the front door, Robert's mother called him back. I stopped too since she had stopped Robert. It's okay, Emily. Wait outside. I felt a bit left out and sad being treated like an outsider. But I figured there might be things for parents and children to discuss alone, so I quietly stepped out and closed the door. While waiting outside, I could hear fragments of Robert's conversation with his mother through the door. Allowance. I understand. It was hard to make out the full conversation. But I heard allowance. I hadn't known before, but it seemed Robert had been sending his mother money. But why did they need to send me away for a conversation about allowance? Did they think I would oppose it? Sorry for making you wait. No, it's fine. Though I was curious about the allowance discussion, it wasn't shared with me, so I couldn't ask Robert. I hadn't felt any anxiety about marrying him until this greeting with his mother, but now I started to feel some. Months later, Robert and I got married and started our married life. The anxiety I felt during that marriage greeting was completely blown away by our marital bliss. So much so, I had forgotten about the allowance conversation. But soon after we started living together, I was reminded of it. This is how much I've saved up. What about you, Robert? Well, Robert nervously placed his bank book on the table, like a child caught doing something wrong. How couples handle their savings from before marriage varies. We decided to treat our pre-marriage savings as joint funds. So, we were showing each other our bank books, but I was shocked when I saw Robert's. What? There's hardly anything here. Why? You were so frugal. Well, I've been sending money to my mom. Hearing allowance, I suddenly remembered the conversation between Robert and his mother during the marriage greeting. Allowance and an almost empty bank book. A feeling of unrest stirred in my chest. Now that I knew he was giving money to his mother, it was something that involved our joint finances. So, I felt no hesitation in asking. "The allowance is for your mom, right? How much are you sending?"
$4,000 a month.
$4,000? I was stunned by the amount, much higher than I expected. I never thought such a big issue would come up so soon after our marriage. Robert had started sending $600 a month when he first started working, but his mother gradually demanded more, and now it's $4,000 a month. Initially, his mother said she didn't need any allowance. But even then, Robert continued to send her money. Maybe she got used to living comfortably with the allowance. Despite being only 57 and still young, she quit her job and now only works part-time, relying entirely on Robert's allowance for her living expenses. After subtracting $4,000 from Robert's salary, we're left with just enough to cover the bare essentials. Now, I finally understood why he lived in a cheap apartment and bought so little. "Why do you keep up with such an unreasonable allowance? If it's tough, you could just say no or reduce it to a more manageable amount, right?" "No, well, my mom struggled to raise me until I graduated college, and I think money was tight, so when she asks, it's hard for me to say no." As I gently placed Robert's bank book back on the table, he stared blankly at it and fell silent. It seems he couldn't refuse his mother's demands because of his gratitude for being raised and his overly kind nature. I think Robert is also responsible for not refusing his mother's requests. But hearing his story, it seems like his mother understands his sense of obligation and takes advantage of his kind nature. I spoke to Robert, who looked dejected like a scolded child, in as gentle a tone as possible. "I think it's good to take care of your mother, but the current relationship isn't healthy." "Yeah, you're right, it isn't healthy." Robert picked up his bank book, flipping through it with a sigh. It seemed he understood that his relationship with his mother couldn't continue this way. But given his personality and the future relationship with his mother, suddenly stopping the allowance or reducing it back to the initial $600 seemed difficult. "Could you gradually reduce the allowance amount?" "Yeah, I'll talk to my mom about it next time I call her." Robert left the living room to put away his bank book, looking somewhat diminished. 3 days after the high allowance was revealed, Robert still hadn't contacted his mother. I wanted him to call her soon, but I understood that asking his mother to reduce the allowance must require a lot of courage for him. So, I couldn't rush him. However, before long, his mother took the initiative. "Hello, Emily? I have a small favor to ask. I'm about to go back to work after my break." "It's okay, this will be quick. Actually, I've been getting an allowance from my son. I heard from Robert the other day. His mother had called to tell me she was receiving an allowance from him. She probably figured that sooner or later, I'd find out she was getting $4,000 a month. So she decided to confess first to mitigate my anger and try to keep the amount from being reduced. Her timing during my lunch break also seemed calculated, as being short on time might prevent me from making a calm decision. I began to understand why Robert couldn't stand up to his mother. She was more cunning than I had thought, and bolder than I had imagined. "So, you know about the allowance. That makes it easier. Since Robert is married and you're working, the household income has increased, right? So, I was thinking, maybe you could increase the allowance amount. Robert's already giving me $4,000, so how about another $2,000 from your salary?" "What?" I blurted out loud, attracting glances from my coworkers. Embarrassed, I apologized to them while still on the phone with his mother. "That's impossible, you know?" "Is it? Then maybe I should ask Robert for another $2,000? "Wait! What are you thinking?" I raised my voice again, apologizing to my coworkers once more. That's why she was concerned about my income at the marriage greeting. "But if you won't pay, I guess I'll have to ask Robert." "All right, I'll handle it. But not this month, please start from next month." "Thank you, that helps." I hung up the phone, tasting a deep sense of defeat. I had given in to her demands, cornered by a phone call during my work break and her using Robert as leverage. I had fallen right into her trap. That night, I told Robert about the call and her demand for an increased allowance.
What? Mom called Emily? And she asked you for an allowance too? I'm sorry, Robert. You said you'd try to reduce the allowance, but now I've agreed to increase it. No, Emily, you don't have to apologize. What is Mom thinking?
I apologized to Robert, feeling a bit relieved. He usually becomes meek when it comes to his mother, but he showed anger when he heard she had demanded an allowance from me. This was a good sign, as it might mean he would stand up to her. However, that positive turn was short-lived. The company's gonna go bankrupt. The next evening, as Robert returned from work, he staggered towards me like a zombie and reported in a lifeless voice that made me question my ears. I was left speechless, my hands frozen in the middle of preparing dinner. We're newlyweds, and with the issues with his mother, what terrible timing. I thought, why now? But in these times, a company going bankrupt is not unheard of. Robert, who had worked diligently, wasn't to blame. I decided to redirect my disappointment towards the country's inability to escape recession and stimulate economic growth. This changes things. The next day, I called my mother-in-law. About increasing the allowance to $6,000 from next month, could you wait a little?
Why? What happened?
Well, Robert's company is going bankrupt. Considering the future, I'd like to wait a bit before increasing the allowance.
Eh? But Emily, you promised to increase it to $6,000 from next month, right?
The situation has changed, so, please.
I feel sorry for my son, but you made a promise. Even if he loses his job, you have some savings, right? Plus, Robert will get severance pay, unemployment benefits, layoff notice allowances, right?
But, still. I tried to resist, but she wouldn't accept my request. I thought about telling Robert, but he was in a daze from the shock of unemployment. I couldn't bring up the allowance. Pondering what to do, I watched Robert's listless face staring at the TV. Why does she still demand an allowance when her son is unemployed? As I watched Robert, feeling weaker by the moment, anger slowly began to rise within me, thinking back to the phone conversation with my mother-in-law. A month after Robert's unemployment. It was time for the $6,000 allowance, but I transferred only $4,000. Of course, my money-hungry mother-in-law called that night.
I checked the bank account. Why is the allowance only $4,000 this month? Didn't you say it would be $6,000?
She must have been looking forward to the $2,000 increase. Her anger was palpable. But there was a reason I could only send $4,000. I had to tell her the truth. Robert has passed away, so there will be no more allowances.
What? What are you saying? There's $4,000 here.
I know it's hard to believe, but it's true. Robert became mentally ill after the company's bankruptcy and took his own life. The $4,000 this time was due to the bank's automatic transfer service he used, which I couldn't cancel in time.
No way. Is it true? When?
About a week after our last phone call.
Why didn't you tell me?
Robert wrote in his will not to have a funeral and to keep it secret for a while. We had a direct burial. He must have felt ashamed to end his life after 30. He wrote in his will to tell others it was a subarachnoid hemorrhage, but I wanted to tell you the truth. She fell silent. All I could hear was the faint sound of the TV from her house. Losing her son must have left her speechless. She might also regret making Robert send her high allowances. During the silent moment, I thought that, but it seems I was mistaken.
By the way, wasn't Robert insured? Since there was no funeral, there should be some money left, right? Isn't that money for me? What? I invested time and money in raising him, hoping to get more back. I thought I'd still be able to get some money. Are you serious? Your son has died, and these are the words you come up with? If he's gone, there's no need to be careful with words, right?
Oh, and since I won't get Robert's $4,000 anymore, we had agreed on $2,000 from you, so keep that up. Don't be ridiculous. I found myself yelling at the unbelievable words of my mother-in-law and hung up the phone. This was her true nature. It left a bitter taste in my mouth, but this should resolve the allowance issue with her. A week after the unpleasant call with my mother-in-law, the doorbell rang early in the morning. Hurry up and open the door. When I answered the intercom, her face filled the screen, yelling at me. But I responded calmly, without any surprise. I'm coming, please don't yell. I stopped the toaster I was using to make toast and leisurely headed to the front door. Perhaps I was too slow, as my impatient mother-in-law started banging on the door and shouting. What are you doing? Open up. I opened the door with a feeling of annoyance, and there she stood, looking furious. You lied. I heard that Robert is working as usual. About Robert? Yes, the part about him passing away was a lie. What? My mother-in-law was taken aback by my blunt admission of the lie, looking foolishly surprised. I never intended to keep up the lie that Robert had died, it was just to deceive her over the phone. Therefore, Robert has been living his life without hiding. He's found a new job and leaves for work every morning, and he communicates normally with acquaintances and friends. Probably, my mother-in-law heard from someone else that Robert was alive. She must feel quite embarrassed for misunderstanding that her own son had died. Why would you tell such a lie? It was to confirm your true nature. Robert, having no need to hide, also came to the entrance. I heard the last phone call too. What did you say? I listened to that conversation. About not needing to be considerate anymore, and about the preliminary investment. Hearing her mention of the preliminary investment, Robert glared at her. His expression, one I had never seen before, intimidated my mother-in-law, and her earlier bravado completely vanished. Robert had always been a bit weak when it came to his mother, but now he stood confidently. Just as I had planned. I couldn't bear the idea of my disheartened, unemployed husband being pressured for more allowance by his mother. Initially, I intended to gradually reduce the allowance, but I decided to stop it altogether. Robert had already promised to try reducing the allowance. Considering his character and his relationship with his mother, it must have taken courage. Encouraged by my words, he mustered that courage, and I thought if I pushed a little more, we could stop the allowance altogether. So, my plan was to pretend Robert had died, expose my mother-in-law's true nature, and have Robert confirm it. It was a disrespectful plan, I know. But if things continued, it would ruin Robert's life. So, I was prepared to be seen as the villain for executing this plan. So, I was raised as an investment for money. No, that was just a metaphor, an example. Really? Then what did you mean by preliminary investment? My mother-in-law was desperately trying to find a way out. Looking around for any hint. Unfortunately for her, no matter what counterargument she tried to come up with, she had few cards to play. So, you repay the kindness of being raised by betraying me like this. What a terrible son and daughter-in-law. I glared at her, mentally cheering. The old Robert might have backed down when confronted with his debt of being raised. But now, knowing her true nature, that tactic wouldn't work on him. And I had prepared for this card. Any debt of being raised has long been repaid. What? Robert attended public schools from elementary to university, right? The cost of raising a child in such cases is about $140,000. Robert has been sending allowances for 10 years. It started at $600, then $1,000, $1,400, $2,000, and now $4,000. The total sum of the allowances so far is $216,000. If his upbringing was an investment, then you've already profited by over $60,000. Isn't that enough? My mother-in-law seemed at a loss for words. All she could do was open and close her mouth like a fish, with no sound coming out. This was also information I had researched on the internet to help push Robert's back. Thinking about how his mother had spent effort and money on raising him, my kind-hearted husband couldn't push her away. So, I told Robert about the amount of money spent on him and how he had already paid back more than that. Realizing he had already repaid his debt in numbers, it seems Robert was able to clear his mind of any obligation towards his mother.
From next month on, we're not sending any allowance. Wait a minute. That's not fair. How will I live without it? You're still 57, right? You can work plenty. But work at this age, after all this time?
My mother-in-law tried to argue, but seeing Robert's firm stance, she seemed to give up. Her voice fading and eventually falling silent. This was the outcome I had hoped for. It would have been okay for me to refuse the allowance. But if I did, she might still try to get money from Robert behind my back. So, it was necessary for Robert himself to refuse it.
I have plans with Emily today. If we're done here, can you leave? And don't contact us again. It's always about money with you anyway.
Robert pushed my mother-in-law out of the entrance, closed the door with force, and immediately locked it. It seemed she had realized she couldn't change the situation, as her footsteps receded from the other side of the door.
I'm going back to preparing breakfast.
I returned to the kitchen and resumed toasting the bread. Robert, as he said, firmly stopped the allowance. My mother-in-law, who had been relying on the allowance for living, had to start job hunting, as part-time work wasn't enough. But with a nearly 10-year gap and nearing 60, it seemed she couldn't find a job. Moreover, it appeared she had spent the allowance she received from Robert every month, leaving her with no savings. Now, she's juggling 4 part-time jobs, working from morning till night. Had she shown even a hint of remorse when I said Robert had died, I might have continued the allowance a bit. But she called his upbringing a preliminary investment. She had a chance but failed to seize it, and her tough life now is her own doing. Robert has no intention of caring for her in her old age. Starting to prepare for retirement at 57 with no savings will be tough, so she'll have to work hard. As for us, we're enjoying our newlywed life. Robert has become brighter since the burden of the allowance was lifted. Also, having the courage to stand up to his mother has seemingly made him a bit more rugged. I've grown to love him even more. Eager to see my beloved husband, I'm hurrying home from work today. My name is Caroline Johnson. I've been married for 10 years, but my husband, Thomas, and I don't have any children. Thomas believes that as long as a couple is happy together, it doesn't matter if they have kids or not. He's the youngest in his family, and his older brother takes care of their parents. I'm an only child. So I needed to take care of my parents eventually. Thomas agreed, and we decided to build a new house for this purpose. But once the house was finished, Thomas said something unbelievable.
Now that we've moved in, all that's left is for my parents to join us.
I was pleased with how everything was settling in and said so. Just then, the doorbell rang as if someone had been waiting for our move to be complete. When I opened the door, a young woman was standing there. Who might you be? I wondered since we hadn't even introduced ourselves to the neighbors yet. But when Thomas came out from inside, he cheerfully invited her in. What do you think? It's a brand new house.
Wow, large windows and a lawn. And a spacious kitchen. What about the bathroom?
She walked around as if it were her own house, with Thomas showing her around. Thomas was eagerly showing her around. Who is she? I wondered, but couldn't get a moment to ask my husband, who was completely engrossed in attending to her. Maybe she's a relative? I thought as I prepared tea.
Nothing beats a new house. The home gym is amazing. Especially the bathroom, it's so big. I could even watch videos while taking a bath.
It's so spacious, 2 people could easily fit in there.
Well, yeah, it's quite fancy.
What? Fancy? When the 2 of them finally came back to the living room, they snuggled up together on the sofa. But I don't like the color of the bedspread. That's easy, we can just replace it with a new one. What are they talking about? The bed doesn't matter. So, we're good then?
Of course. Honey, who's this person?
She's my lover. What, a lover? Shocked by his unexpected words, I desperately tried to think that he must mean something other than a lover. But I couldn't think of any other possibility. Wow, the old lady looks surprised. Thomas, didn't you tell her anything? No, I haven't said anything yet. That's not good. You should have told her. Don't worry, I'm gonna tell her now. What is he going to say? Who is this woman claiming to be a lover? You might not have known, but Margaret here is my girlfriend. Now he says she's his girlfriend. My husband, Thomas, is 38, and this woman in front of me is clearly in her late 20s. Yet, he's calling her his lover, then his girlfriend. I can't make sense of what he's saying. You still don't get it? You're so clueless. Does this mean you've been cheating? It's not cheating. Is he going to say it's serious? It is serious. Ah, just as I thought. This feels like a line from some TV shows I've seen. The whole "it's not cheating, it's serious" thing. So, this is betrayal, right? Yeah, you could see it that way. But it can't be helped. I love Margaret more than you. Such blatant defiance. So, I'm gonna leave you. A 38-year-old man bringing home such a young woman and suddenly talking about divorce. And this, just after we've built a new house, with a mortgage looming ahead. What about this house? It's brand new, you know? And we've got a mortgage to pay off. You don't need to worry about the mortgage. After all, the house is in your name, so you're the one who'll be paying it. What? Yes, the house is in my name. When we were discussing the ownership, my husband said, "I'll be covering the living expenses, so you can handle the mortgage. In return, let's put it in your name. Who knows, I might pass away first. If it's in my name, there'll be all that fuss about inheritance tax, right?" That made sense to me, so I agreed to his proposal. So, Margaret and I will live here, right? Right. What do they mean by right? This house was built to live with my parents. I never planned to live with your parents. You were just dreaming that up on your own. How could you? I planned to live here with Maggie from the start. Just as originally intended. How is this originally intended? I wanted to say so much, but my mind went blank and I couldn't think of what to say. Even if I wanted to argue, I couldn't find the words. So, Margaret and I will live here. You should leave. Here, I've prepared the divorce paper. My husband said this mockingly as he handed me the divorce forms. Meanwhile, Margaret was looking at her nails. They were long, neatly manicured. Can he really live with a woman who keeps her nails like that? Hurry up and take it. Once you've taken, pack your stuff and leave. And, take the divorce papers to the court, will you? We're planning to get married soon. The woman said, smiling triumphantly. Feeling rushed, I took the divorce papers and went to the bedroom to pack my things. I was supposed to sleep in this bed tonight, but now it will be my husband and that woman. I felt nauseous. Hey, how much longer are you going to take? Margaret is telling you to hurry up. Just get out already. I couldn't say anything back, barely managing a nod. Leaving the house, I went to the court to submit the divorce papers. Then, I headed to my parents' house, but tears blurred my vision. Arriving home, my mom greeted me, shocked to see me crying. What happened? Mom. I hadn't cried this loudly in years. Tears flooded out as if releasing all the pent-up emotions. Just come inside. Once inside, she patiently waited for me to stop crying. It must have been an hour before I could finally speak. Then, I started talking non-stop, like a dam had burst. What just happened? The betrayal by my husband. His young lover. My mother was undoubtedly shocked after hearing it all. When did it start? When? I wonder. Thinking about it, there had been signs that something was off about a year ago. But I had convinced myself that my husband couldn't possibly be cheating. Or maybe, it was just easier to think that way and stop suspecting him. I see. Well, I understand how you feel. So, what are you going to do now? What to do?
Are you just going to accept the divorce and step back, letting them do as they please, or are you going to fight back? Fight back? I don't even know what I could do. Yeah, that's tough. After a moment of thought, my mother said, if you decide to fight back, I'll help you. Several weeks later, with advice from my mother, I returned to the new house. What do you want? Came back to pick up something you forgot? Really, old lady, showing up without calling? That's so not cool. We're busy, you know. Quiet, you brat. That's mean. Hey, Tommy, are you going to let her talk to me like that? I'm being bullied by this old lady here. Poor Maggie, it's unacceptable for me to bully you for sure. It's nice that you two are so lovey-dovey, but I've come to talk. Can't you let me in? Why not just talk here at the door? This is my house. You're a stranger now. This can't possibly be your house anymore. Right, that's the important point. I'm a stranger to this man. Too bad. The rights to this place are mine. Now, move aside. I pushed past them and headed to the living room. But it was no longer the living room I had loved, it was filled with the woman's tastes. Such childish taste. Better than being old-fashioned. What's this all about? Spit it out already. I sat down on the sofa, smiled mockingly at them, and said, "Get out." What? Get out? Are you kidding me? You're the one who should be leaving. No, it's you who should leave. The owner of this house is me. Now that we're divorced, I, as the owner, have the rights. If you don't leave, I'll sue you. Sue us? That's right. How can you even sue? That's impossible. Have you lost your mind after the divorce? My mind is perfectly fine. Like I said earlier, we're strangers now that we're divorced. And I'm the owner of this house. You staying here without my consent is trespassing. If you don't want to be sued, you better pack your things and leave quickly. Don't be ridiculous. You didn't say anything like that when we divorced. Of course not. How could I remain calm when you suddenly brought your lover home? In such a situation, who would think about the law? That's impossible. What? I'm saying you can't do it. Oh, and why is that? With your personality, I can't see you doing something like that. I've known you all this time. You couldn't do anything without me. And now suddenly, you're capable of such a big move? You're just trying to threaten me. You're underestimating me. Happy now? Who's underestimating whom? If you keep this up, you're going to get hurt, you know? Ah, do your worst. Fine, you asked for it. I came here to warn you kindly, but you're just foolish. So, if that's what you want, I'll proceed. Enjoy cooling your head in jail. I said this, stood up and headed towards the door. I got into my car and immediately called my lawyer. A few days later, Thomas called me in a panic. Hey! I got a letter from the lawyer. Oh, really? You actually sued us? I haven't sued you yet. But I wouldn't say such things blindly. Before going to the police, I consulted a lawyer. So, we're going to get arrested? That's right. If you don't leave, I'll go to the police. You might be detained for up to 72 hours. If that happens, your employer will find out, and you might even get fired. Why would you do something like that? I haven't done it yet. Please stop. If you want me to stop, then leave that place. No, I can't. Margaret wouldn't like it. I don't care what your dear Maggie thinks. That house is mine. What am I supposed to do? How can I stay in this house? I can agree to a settlement. A settlement? Yes. The settlement amount is $20,000. $20,000? It's a cheap price to stay here. So if I pay $20,000, can I really stay here? Yes, you can. And you won't go to the police? I won't. But if you want to stay, you need to pay the mortgage on this house. Think of it as rent. Rent. Then, I heard some talking in the background over the phone. Listening closely, it sounded like Margaret was saying something. Hey, if we get arrested, will we really go to jail?
you'll be detained for questioning. Then it might go to trial, and you could either get a real sentence or a fine.
A fine? What's that?
Look it up. There's plenty of info online.
If you know, just tell me.
Scared much? A fine means you settle it with money.
How much?
Who knows? It says up to $2,000.
Then isn't it better to just go to trial?
If you think so, go ahead. But remember, you'll have a criminal record, and you'll definitely lose your job. Plus, finding a new job will be tough.
Ah.
If it were just about money, wouldn't everyone choose a trial? But there's a big social risk involved.
So, that's how it is.
So, accepting a settlement is the best option, isn't it? And if you want to live in that house, you'll have to pay rent.
How much is the rent?
The full amount of the mortgage.
Once I finish paying that, will the house be mine?
Of course not. The house is in my name. I pay the taxes on it, so it's mine, no matter how you look at it.
That's not right, Margaret says.
I don't care how wrong she thinks it is. Your dear Maggie doesn't understand the societal aspects, does she? How the world works.
Ah. She's young.
If you understand it's because of her youth, then as the older one, you should teach her. Not that you could.
Your words are harsh.
Well, yes. We're strangers now, so I don't need to consider your feelings. I used to choose my words not to upset you, but I don't need to do that anymore.
I see. Hey, give me the title to the house.
The title?
Yeah. Margaret wants to own this house. And we didn't divide any property when we divorced. I should at least get the house, right?
Do you think we had property to divide? We both contributed to the living expenses from our earnings, right? So, there's no joint savings. In fact, all the household items and appliances, I mostly paid for them. Technically, I could take all of it. Oh, and the furniture we bought when we renovated, I paid for that too.
That's ridiculous.
See? Pretending to know about property division will only hurt you.
So, okay, not property division. Just give me the house.
Are you okay in the head? I can't believe you're asking for that.
I have no choice. Margaret insists she wants the house in her name.
You're just a puppet. So naive.
Please.
All right then, you just need to pay the down payment of $20,000.
Down payment?
Yes, that much for the title to become yours. It's a pretty good deal, I think.
Yeah, I guess so. All right, I'll pay $20,000.
Then, with the settlement and the down payment, that makes $40,000 in total. Plus, you'll cover the costs for the title transfer.
What? What's that?
It's a gift, so there'll be a gift tax. Tough, isn't it?
You've got to be kidding.
This is real, quite a shock, isn't it?
All right. I'll do it for Maggie.
Sure, Maggie this, Maggie that. Please make sure the payment is in one lump sum, Maggie. So, I received a total of $40,000 in cash, comprising the settlement of $20,000 and a down payment of another $20,000. But I wasn't planning to let it end there. Considering the humiliation and pain I had endured, I wouldn't be satisfied until he hit rock bottom. A month later, I heard Thomas's panicked voice again.
Hey, Caroline.
What's this about? Hello there. But you know, you and I are strangers now. Please don't address me so informally.
Got it.
What is this about? Well, you're saying this over the phone. That's funny.
A lawyer's demanding spousal support from me.
Oh, that's a pretty standard claim.
How is it standard? We're already divorced, and the papers have been processed.
True. But the cause of the divorce is on you. You brought your lover into our home, and when asked about cheating, you openly admitted it was serious. It's absurd to think you wouldn't be sued and asked for spousal support.
But you didn't mention this when we divorced.
Well, back then, my mind was blank. I didn't think of it. Now that I'm calm, I see I have quite an advantage.
But why now? It's been a month since we divorced.
Isn't that something you claim right away? Or discuss it at the time? Listen, there's no period for claiming spousal support. It can be claimed anytime unless the divorce judgment changes. Oh, divorce teaches you so much. Hey, I've already paid $40,000 for the settlement and down payment for the house. And now spousal support on top of that. That $20,000 was to keep you and Maggie out of jail. And the other $20,000 was the down payment because you wanted the house, right? Neither of those has no business with it. I know, but this is just impossible. Guess what? I have some exciting news. What? The only good news would be you dropping the spousal support claim. Not happening. But here's a new fact I discovered after we split. Listen up. I'm pregnant with your child. What? No way. True. With all this happening, I felt sick. I thought it was a stomach ulcer or something, so I went to the gastroenterologist. They told me to visit the gynecologist, and guess what? I'm 3 months pregnant. Yay! We couldn't have kids for so long. Maybe feeling safe about not being able to conceive was what did it. Now, of all times. So, expect a claim for child support too. Child support, even though we're divorced? You can take a DNA test if you wish. However, it just adds to the cost. It's obvious you're the dad. Please pay the child support. No way! You're planning to have the baby at your age? Of course. It's my long-awaited child. There's no question of not having it. This is crazy! We were okay with the mortgage because we couldn't have kids. No, you thought it was okay because you planned to make me pay it. Well, maybe I did think that. I'm not saying you have to pay every month. What do you mean? If you paid every month, Maggie wouldn't like it, right? It'd reduce the money for her, even though it's not her child. So, spousal support and child support, I'd prefer it all in one lump sum. You can't be serious. I am. I don't lie like you do. That's impossible. Well then, do you want to pay monthly? I'm sure Maggie would be furious. Can you handle that? No way. Right. So, it's better to pay it all at once. Even if it means getting a loan. You can always make up some story about why you need the loan. You're good at lying. After all, you cheated on me without me knowing. You! So, the spousal support is $60,000, and child support for 20 years at $600 per month comes to $144,000. Oh, the total is $204,000, lucky me. You've got to be kidding! How am I supposed to pay that? If you can't pay, I'll have to ask my lawyer to take legal action. Keep that in mind. I'll have to borrow from a consumer loan service. Why not ask Maggie to work? Having run out of savings, my husband borrowed from a loan service and paid everything in a lump sum. I never thought he'd actually borrow from a consumer loan service, but his going into the negative was lucky for me. The timing of the pregnancy was surprising, but I think the baby was cheering me on. Now, Thomas is struggling with the mortgage payments. He probably thought he could manage with his savings for a while. I can't pay because I have no money doesn't cut it. So, Thomas's solution was to plead, Maggie, I'm sorry. Could you please work? But Margaret was having none of it. What? Are you joking? Why should I work? Tommy, you said I could be a stay-at-home wife when we got married. I know, but I can't pay the mortgage. We both have to work now. No way! Why suddenly change? You said we were fine because of your savings. Well, there's a bit of a situation with that. I don't care. I absolutely refuse to work. No matter how much he tried to reason with her, Margaret refused to work, not doing anything around the house or even cooking properly. She spent her days playing games or hanging out with friends. This can't go on. I have no choice but to sell the house. Thomas decided to sell and went to a real estate agency run by my friend. This friend, though mutual, was closer to me. What? It's a new house. Why are you selling it? Well, it's because After hearing the situation, my friend came to me with the story. Everything was in Thomas's favor, not mentioning anything about his mistress. So, I told my friend everything that happened. So, can you sell the house? It's tough. It's new but considered secondhand now. Plus, he wants to sell it high. And it's far from the station. But I'll give it a try. However, it didn't sell, and the price kept dropping. He complained that it's down a lot, half of what it cost to build it. Really? It dropped that much? Then I'll buy it. The house, new but now secondhand, was going for cheap, but I wanted it even cheaper. Really? Yeah, but I don't want to buy at the current price. If you can drop it by another $100,000, I'll buy it. Just don't tell Thomas it's me buying. All right, got it. Then, my friend approached Thomas saying, there's someone interested in buying, but they're asking if the price can be lowered even more. If you drop it by another $100,000, they'll buy it. That much? Yes, that's the offer. But think about it, if you keep holding on to the house without selling, the mortgage will just keep piling up, right? It's better to sell, isn't it? Skillfully steering the conversation, my friend managed to get Thomas to agree to lower the price by another $100,000, selling it to me for less than half its original value. However, Margaret, who hadn't been informed about the sale, was furious. Why are you selling the house behind my back? What do you mean we have to move out by the end of the month? This is not a joke. You're so worthless. I'm sorry, Maggie. But I had no choice. If we continue like this, we won't be able to pay the mortgage and we'll lose the house anyway. All that will be left is debt. That's not my problem. You said I could live in a new house when we got married. This is like a fraud. I'm sorry, please forgive me. There's no way I'm forgiving you. I can't live with a loser like you. I'll divorce you right away. Furious, Margaret left Thomas after he begged for forgiveness. Thomas then used the money from the house sale to repay his consumer loan. However, the mortgage remained. He tried to stay positive, telling himself, all I have to do now is pay the monthly mortgage. And he continued to pay the mortgage, which had been reduced by about half. But then, further disaster struck. It was the damage bill I sent to Margaret for her annoying harassment before the divorce. Thinking it unfair for Thomas to suffer alone, I sent Margaret a bill for ruining my marriage. Margaret, however, tried to make Thomas pay for it. Why am I getting this bill? It's not my fault. You're the one to blame. You should pay for it. Margaret said. Frustrated, Thomas came complaining to me. Why are you sending Margaret a damage bill? I could sense his plea for mercy. You know, she was part of breaking up a family, right? It's only what she deserves. But it's all coming down on me. Just refuse to pay if you don't like it. I said, but Thomas, being bombarded with complaints by Margaret, made a promise he couldn't keep to pay it himself. In the end, he borrowed from a consumer loan service again to pay the bill in full. This led him into an even more difficult situation, as the interest on the loans compounded. He worked his day job and cleaned buildings at night, but it didn't bring in much money. Desperate, he even tried medical trial jobs, which left him physically exhausted and struggling through hard days. As for me, I was living comfortably in the new house with my parents and newborn child. Enjoying a very affluent lifestyle thanks to the reduced price of the house, the child support and spousal support, and the down payment from Thomas. It's indeed a happy life for me.